So how is everyone this morning?
Good.
He was tired.
I totally understand the feeling. Trust me. It has been one long week. I've been with my son in the ER twice this week. So that makes it for a nice long week, especially when they're all overnight. Come on in. Is there anyone else, or just keep hearing the door? That's it? All right. So is everyone ready for the wonderful day? Everyone ready for the wonderful day?
Yes.
Okay. How many of y'all like pizza?
Yes.
Oh, y'all are teenagers, right? Y'all all love pizza. Yeah, you're going to get the pizza again today. All right. A couple things that I want to tell you about. You're also going to be getting some drinks today. You can get one drink at lunch for free. And if you need anything else, you got to go out of the vending machine, all right? So I'd suggest if you get either the Gatorade or the water bottle, there's a water fountain right there. It's free. All right? Now, actually, the better one's going to be on the other end of the building in this hallway because it's cooler and better tasting than this one. Is the FYI. Do what? Yeah. It's also lower, too. At this time, we're going to go ahead and break away the middle school students with Sean. So if you're middle school team, go ahead and go with Sean. He's going to take you around over to room 214. All right, now that'll make a little bit more room for the high schoolers, right? Well, what I'm going to say is it'll be best if you work with your team as we're going over. What I want you to do today, how many of y'all have scratch sheets of paper and pens or pencils? Some writing utensil that's not blood.
Yeah.
I'm not going to clean it up after you. Sorry. Okay. As I go through this image today, when I talk about something and I do this or those might be helpful hints that you might want to write down as to where certain locations are of certain things you might want to know on how to fix. Okay? Well, I can't tell you what to fix or how to fix it.
Everybody take a notebook.
I'm going to give you some good, strong hints on how I would fix things. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
All right.
One on the user account on there.
It'd
Some of them are
Okay.
left.
C, Patriot, and it's password one with capital P. And if it locks them out, they have wait 5 minutes and it'll reset. Okay. What we're going to cover today is the Windows 2008 system. Okay, we're talking specifically about a server. A couple things you need to know. First and foremost, a couple things weren't here last week. We're doing this completely different this year. I'm taking you step by step through how to navigate, what things you need to look for to fix the system. That's why I said it's nice to take notes, as well as the processes in which they're going to test you on. I'll show you where to go get information to get the numbers that you need for certain events like the account lockouts, duration. Come on in, Jim. And as we go through this, then we'll eat lunch, then we'll have competition. And that's how it's going to go each week. So, each week of competition, come on in, come on in. The middle school is in 214. What we're going to do is we'll have a 3-hour competition time window. Now, what I'm going to look for is when I start to see everyone stopping and playing and doing other things, then I'm called competition time. Does that make sense? So you may not get 3 hours because you need to focus on this and to do your best. I know y'all can do it, right? How many of you are A students? I'll raise your hand because each one of you can be if you want to be. All right? So when we do these systems, it'll be nice and easy. Just follow along with what I said. Take notes, write stuff down, and it's going to be better for the competition. Today's competition, you're going to have 2 different operating systems. Windows 7, which we covered last week. Very similar to Windows 2008. Okay? So those that weren't here last week, you'll get some better understanding of Windows 7. And some of you that were here last week will get a regurgitation, almost. There's going to be other processes and procedures that we're going to talk about today, like how to promote a server into Active Directory. And then once we do that, then we can change things with group policy. Okay? Those where a lot of your changes will be for your local security policy that you had on Windows 7. Y'all remember local security policy, right? Group policy is what the server pushes out to overwrite any of those local security policies on those machines. So basically, it becomes the parent telling all the children what they can do. So if you need to edit something, edit a setting, you'll edit in group policy. Does that make sense? And then I'll show you how to push the updates where it'll update that system so you don't have to worry about it. All right? So these are going to be things that you want to know for today. The lecture time is approximately an hour and a half. And I'm going to start stopping right as the pizza gets here so y'all can have warmer pizza. So if we need to pick up, a couple minutes later, I don't think we'll have that long of a time of wait. All right. And if anything, it'll be more of a regurgitation. I'm going to go through everything we need to first. Then I may have to regurgitate something right after lunch, and then y'all can go ahead and start your competition when I say start. All right. Now for Marlowe and Choctaw, since y'all weren't here last week, your login in vSphere for your image will be CP dash your school name, which is either going to be Choctaw, not Choctaw, Air Force Junior ROTC, just be Choctaw or Marlowe dash RSC. Your password will be password 1 with the P. Now, mind you, you only have one competition image that can be. Now, everyone can log in and see it, but only one person can control it at a time. Now that you have 2 images, what I would recommend for each team is to have a couple of you focusing on the Win 7, a couple of you focusing on 2008. Does that make sense? Yes, sir.
It's CP-Choctaw-what?
RSC, for Rose State College.
So that's the username. Do I need to do /rose in front of it?
Mm-hmm. Okay. No, then it's.
So I tried that. It didn't
work.
Because it's on the RSC domain. Is that an issue?
No, that's what it needs to be.
Okay.
And then, if not, try not to do it this way, but. I know it's very secure. But try the CP first because I don't want them knowing.
It's definitely the RSC domain.
Yeah. Don't worry about the domain. Just type in the thing. You'll be okay. All right. Does everyone understand where we're at?
Hey Scott, are we using R2 or just the regular 2008?
2008 only, but R2 has the same features. There's just a few minor tweaks.
Okay, and is that in our vSphere? Which one is that?
Well, the tweaks they're not going to grade them on because they're still focused on 2008.
Gotcha.
Now they will have an R2 image a little bit later on, but what you're going to do is none of those tweaks are going to be what's really part of the testing. You understand that?
I was just looking for the one underneath non-scored images for practice.
Yeah, that is an R2 image, so they can just play around with it.
Okay, cool.
The Week 2 competition is just a straight 2008. That's what we're going to go over.
Awesome, thanks.
All right. Did y'all hear that? In your non-scored images, I gave you all the types of images that you're going to have. I haven't put the Unix ones out there yet, but that gives you something y'all can play around with and go and look and whatever you need to do. I'll have a snapshot on there so you can always revert the snapshot back to the original image. So it gives you a chance to play, go around, mess around with it, revert the snapshot, go back and mess around with it, revert back to the previous snapshot. And I'll show you all how to do that before we leave today so that y'all are aware. All right? Any questions on that? Okay. What we're going to do is I need to come up here to log in. Now, for y'all aren't going to have this right here. You can go into your non-scored images. How many of y'all remember vSphere? It'd be Carl Albert 1. No, CP-Carl Albert 1-RSC. Yes, sir. The IP address is VC, is in Victor Charlie, .cyber.rose.edu. Yes, sir. Password is password1 with a capital P. Okay? And just for everyone's understanding, the images, all images, if it requires password to log in, it's password1 with a capital P. Okay? For the exercise here, in training here, all passwords will be password1 with a capital P. Make it easier for you. Okay. All right. Can y'all see that okay, Kurt? Just take off the one on Carl Albert. Just put Carl Albert.
It's a little small, but I don't know if you can make that bigger or not.
Hang on for just. I just want to make sure real quick. Let's see if I can. Oh, that's fine because it changed on me. Is that better?
That's better. Thank you.
Okay.
We can almost read it now.
Almost read it. Now I can't even see where I'm going here. Hang on. I'm going to have to bring it down one so I can actually get to my toolbar. Alrighty. Well, yes, sir. No, we're going to be on the Windows 2008 server. Now, the one that you're going to be looking at is on your non-scored images. It will be R2. Okay. There'll be some differences than what you see here, but it's the same idea, same concepts. That's what you need to be familiar with. All right. Everyone in on a vSphere?
Won't let you type?
Yeah, we need the
Yeah, that would be. Oh no, take off the. It's EDU, not EDU. It's cyber CY. Oh, I see you.
for the local area network here.
There you go. Okay. They're working on it. Y'all have your image up. Y'all have an image up. Okay. What you do is right click on it. Are y'all up? Okay. Go ahead, right click on it to power it on. And then right click and open console so that you can all see your image. Y'all got that, Kurt?
Yeah.
Okay. All righty. Once everyone gets up.
Okay. Yep, got it. E4T2. T2.
P0.
P0.
RC2.
0 or O?
0.
Okay, 0. Okay.
RC2.
Lowercase RCs?
Yep.
Thanks.
And then lowercase R1A.
RSC. RSC. All righty. Everyone there now? I'm going to go ahead and get started. First thing that you're going to see is an initialization task. Now, I may have already checked this. It's not show again at logon in your practice image because I didn't want you to have to play around with it, because it gives away automatically some answers. So when you get your competition window, you're going to see something very similar to this right here. Okay? What I want you to look at, and they may or may not test on this, and I highly doubt they will, but if you click on this, you can set your time clock, right? Everyone's familiar with that? How to set the time and what time zone you're in? Everyone with me? Okay. Just want to make sure is everyone in their system? No, I'm just saying they're not going to see this because I've already dismissed it on their image. That's what I'm saying. If you pay attention right here real quick, I'm going to show you what you would see had I not dismissed it. Yes. bc.cyber.rose.edu. Victor Charlie. So everyone have a screen up? Y'all are in 2008 R2, right? Okay. The password for the administrator, all passwords that you will use are password 1 with capital P. Alrighty. Let's go ahead. For right now, none of y'all are going to be able to see anything. Y'all aren't going to be able to see this because I already dismissed it for you when I created the clone. There's a couple things up here you need to be very familiar with. Number 1, configure networking area. What that does is that tells you, are you running an IPv4, IPv6 address? Like I said, you're not going to see this on yours. So look up here. If you don't, I'm going to turn off your monitors. Okay? IPv4 with DHCP enabled. What does that mean? That means my server is automatically going to give me an IP address. All right? Or it'll just say IPv6 enabled, which means, or it could say IPv4 enabled. That just means there's a static address that you've assigned. Yes, John?
Can you clarify for them who's going to get an address? Is their server going to get an address? Or is this client going to get an address?
This is an actual server operating system. You will get a DHCP address, more than likely, from the image. It'll either be assigned by the DHCP server that is on this box, but in real life, what you're going to have is your servers will have a static IP address, usually given by the IANA. When they say, your IP address is 172.24.32.16 and 17 and 18 and 19, that's your range. Okay? So it'll be a .17 or .18. That is what you would get up here, and you would just see IPv4 enabled. If you see IPv4 by DHCP, that means the server itself is getting an IP address from another server. This is acting as a client at this point. An easy way to tell that it's a client and not a DHCP server is the word workgroup. If that says workgroup, it's acting as a client. If it says a domain name, then it is acting as a server. Does that make sense? Y'all are familiar with this client-server architecture, right? Y'all kind of heard about that before? A server provides services to the clients for them to function. That's all it means. A client is what's sitting in front of you, a Windows 7 machine. Okay? Not your VM image, but the actual machine that's sitting in front of you. Take a look at that. If it's on a domain, this is where we're going to start talking about group policy a little bit later on. So make that connection now. If this is a domain, your local security policy will actually be a group policy. Now there are two sides of a group policy. There's one specific to this box and one specific to the entire domain. And I'll break it out and I'll draw it up on the board and show you what I'm talking about. Next thing, one of the big things that Cyber Patriot loves to do is disable auto updates, right? From this initialization screen, if they haven't already taken it off like I did to y'all, you'll be able to see it that it says, what does it say? Not configured, right? So if I have my scoring engine to look at it and say, oh, well, if it's not configured, you haven't applied any updates, is your system secure? No. So this is an easy way to tell, hey, my system is not configured, so I need to make a note. I need to enable updates and install them automatically. So that you don't have to worry about it, so it's going to get every update that there is. Windows error reporting off. If you're doing any auditing, if this says off, you're not doing any auditing. There are going to be very specific things that we're going to talk about today about auditing. What do you need to audit on a server? Download and install updates. Have we ever checked for them? That's another key. We haven't checked for them. Just because we checked for them doesn't mean we've installed them either. All right? I can go out there and say, hey, Windows, tell me all the updates that I need. If there is no, let me do it on here. If there's never any updates, I've never checked for them, I'm vulnerable. Even if I've checked for them, have I installed any? If this says never as well, we're still vulnerable, just as if we'd never checked for them. Now, how many of y'all have ever installed an update and said, man, I wish I hadn't done that? Like iOS 8. How many of y'all familiar with iOS 8 that just came out? Y'all know what it does, right? It literally locks your system down to where no one can get access to it, not even the law enforcement. And Apple will not allow them access. Give it about 3 months and the National Security Agency will bypass that. Okay? So just keep watching the news on that one. Add roles. If Cyber Patriot says this is a web server and they're going to be broadcasting on IIS and they're going to be doing this, that, and the other, and it needs to have Telnet and it needs to have FTP, if I don't have any roles, or it may just say, on the Gatoso.com domain, this web server example.1 or example 1 is a web server or an application server, whatever type of server. And if you don't see any roles here, that means it's not functioning as that. And I'll go through and I'll show you where these roles are, how to install them and how to uninstall them, because you're going to get practice on that today. Add features. Features are not quite as important as adding or removing roles, with the exception is they are dependent upon specific roles, or roles are specific, dependent upon certain features. All right. For example, if I wanted to add IIS, which is Internet Information Services, I have to have the .NET 3.5 framework installed. So if I don't have 3.5 installed here, it's going to install it for me because it has to have that as a dependency. Does that make sense? Enable remote desktop. Voila, it says it's disabled, so this is actually pretty good, right? Remember, I hit on that last week. You don't want any ports open, remote desktop port, FTP, www, whatever. You don't want it open unless that specific scenario requires it to be open. Does that make sense? So when you get to your actual competition and they say it needs to be an IIS server, a web server, and you have DHCP server, DNS server, you will actually lose points because you've allowed other services to get into your system. If it says it just wants a web server, only install a web server. Does that make sense? That's going to eliminate a lot of your headaches. Always check for these features, what are installed and what's not. And I'll show you where you can, another place you can go when you first get into a 2008 system, where to go to see this. Configure firewall. That's another thing they like to turn off. Very easy to do, right? Just click on, and it turns it back on. Then, once you get into the firewall, you have to know what ports to configure. If I say we're doing a web server, what ports do I need to have open?
Hey Scott, we're not seeing the screen changes again.
I haven't changed the screen.
Oh, okay.
I'm still talking about right down here on the firewall.
Sorry about that.
It's no problem. Yes, sir. Port 80. That's web. What about secure web? 443. Well, if I'm a web environment, what if I accidentally turned on all services under IIS? Have I opened a port?
Yes.
What port did I open that I didn't mean to? What? You've opened one additional port called FTP. FTP, or the File Transfer Protocol, is underneath the web services under IIS. So if you click the IIS box and it opens everything up, you've turned on FTP. You've now made your system unsecure while trying to secure it. to meet the scenario. Does that make sense? So you have to be very careful, and I'll show you what I'm talking about. It's unlocked. Yes. I left it. Add 40 to the number that are in 214. All right. Now that we've covered this initialization screen, if it by some chance they screwed up and their image comes up and shows you this, it's giving you a lot of answers off the top. Now, how long did I spend talking about just this screen? About 10 minutes, right? So would that be vitally important to understand where all these concepts are coming from, right? Now, how would I know if they came up and they said, okay, we're going to do this and close it? Well, the first thing that's going to come up is what we call Server Manager. Cool thing is you get the same information and more on this. This is what you're going to get used to seeing, okay? Again, I can also say, do not show me this console at logon, which they may do, but I'll show you how to get around that. Full computer name. They may tell you to give it a computer, Contoso.com, example1.contoso.com. Well, if you have a Win6R whatever it is, you need to change that name to be example1. Why? Because that's the name of the machine. So that when we create the domain of Contoso, it'll bring it up, and then again, workgroup tells you that we're not on a domain yet, right? Y'all are with me? Same thing you saw this, remote desktop is disabled, product ID you could care less about. Security information. From right here on this main screen, you can go right to Windows Firewall and enable it. You can configure your updates. You can check for new rules. You can see if it's ever been checked or updated at all, right from the screen. Now, is that very similar to what you saw just a few minutes ago? Now we have our roles summary. We have 016 roles installed, right? Pretty simple. But before we can go much further, to show you where things are, let's come over here to Start. Now you remember in Windows 7 we had to go to Control Panel to open up administrative tools, to get into the local security policy, to get into add, remove programs are also in the Control Panel, users in the Control Panel, things of that nature, right? Y'all remember that? Well, here you don't have to. You can go directly to administrative tools to get to your services or to your local security policy. Now, by default, when you first install Windows Server 2008, you're going to be in what we call the local work group, okay? Local work group, you're a client at this point. You're providing no services to anybody. So you only have a local security policy. Does that make sense? Everyone with me? Anyone not? Okay. You can also go down here to turn on and off specific services that we talked about last week, like remote desktop, SSDP, universal plug and play, things of that nature, right? Any remote services you want to turn off. So you can also go in here. When we go into Firewall Advanced Security, we can go in there and configure the specific ports that need to be turned on or off. Now, I'm warning you now. You may start seeing me turn on and off or allow ports to be open on certain scenarios starting next week when I give you a scenario of what the system's supposed to do. And make it more realistic exactly of what your competition is going to be like. I'm just trying to get y'all involved and kind of understand where things are first, and then next week I'm going to give each team a scenario and say, here's your scenario for a Windows 2K8 server. Here's your scenario for a Windows 2K7 or Windows 7. Here's your scenario for a Linux machine. What you have to go and do. All right? Everyone with me? So right now, since we're a client, we have local security policy and services. Well, I want to focus today, since we covered all that last week, I want to focus today on the group policy aspect. which means we're going to look at this and we're going to transform this 2008 machine to a server, a true server providing services. So what we're going to do is we're going to add roles. Now, you're going to see this screen where you try to add a role, and all it says before you begin gives you a little thing. I always skip it because it really means nothing. Here are the different types of roles, the 16 roles that you can use. You can have Active Directory Certificate Services, which provide the certificate for SSL. Okay, that you have to have that turned on, and to get your certificate either from a CA root or create yourself a CA certificate. Now, what's the difference between having someone create it for you and you creating it yourself? There's a vulnerability in there, because if I create it for myself, I'm the only one saying who I say I am. Could I be lying who I am? Right. But if I have a trusted certificate authority say that I am example.com, then I'm example.com. Does that make sense? Active Directory Domains and Services, which is what we're going to add today, or right now. ADDS, what does it do? Well, that is what allows you to have users and groups, computers. It's what you can add, what we call objects, to the domain, so they can share resources and services. All right? Like you've logged on to these computers out here. Well, actually, I logged on for you, but when we logged in, we connected to the RSC server that said, you have these permissions. That's what it's about, okay? Federation services, lightweight directory access, and rights management, those are other forms of Active Directory services that we can use for specific purposes. An application server, if I wanted to use apps, I can do that. DHCP server, like I said on the initialization screen, that is what allows me to give a block of addresses that I can assign to a group or an individual. So we'll go over each one of these. I would highly recommend you go to TechNet or MSDN and search for what each one of these specific services do. Because when you go to your competition, it says, you need to have a Pitoso.com domain that will assign a block of 32 addresses to this range. How do you do it? What services do you do? Do you know? Well, if I'm assigning addresses, what service am I providing? Anyone know? DHCP. DHCP says, here's your IP address. So if I say I'm applying or serving an IP address to this group, that's what I would do. DNS will automatically be installed when you do Active Directory Domains and Services. Why? Because once you do Active Directory Domains and Services, each system that is listed underneath the users or group or computers will be assigned an IP address, but also has what we call a colloquial name or a NetBIOS name. Y'all remember that term? NetBIOS name. So that would be me calling Christopher Christopher. Instead of having to remember his birth date and his social security number, I just call Christopher. And the conversation will know exactly who it's going to, right? Does that make sense? How many of your parents call you by your birth date? None of you, right? They call you by your name. That's what DNS does, is it takes that name, transverses it into an IP address so it knows who it's talking to, and then it comes out on the other end. Everyone cool with that and understand that concept, right? Just think of this as it takes one name and puts it to an IP address. So when you go to google.com, how many of you know what Google's IP address is? Huh? Anyone know what Google's IP address is? No. Why? Because it's easier for the human to remember a name than it is a number. So if we say google.com, it's a lot easier to remember 74.125.80 something, and I forget the rest of it. Okay? Is it .45? I mean, they have plenty of IP addresses, but they're on that class, all right? So I just type in google.com, and it takes me to wherever it needs to go. Fax server, that's kind of obvious what that's for, right? Facsimiles. File services. This is if I have How many of y'all familiar with a NAS, Network Attached Storage, SAN? Okay. Well, all that is that it provides file services to different files and allows you to store them as a directory. We have Network Policy Access Server. That is if a client didn't do updates. Well, I can prohibit them from beginning on and getting any services from me because they don't meet my minimum qualifications to connect to me. Also within there is routing and remote access. So there's that's how you can remote or telnet into a system. You have print services, pretty simple. Terminal services is how you can remote in via telnet. UDDI you'll never deal with. Web server. This is going to be your big one. You'll get to see this quite a bit, okay? And then Windows deployment services. Again, Windows deployment service, you can click on here. It'll tell you basically all it is rapidly deploying Windows operating systems to your network. You have an image, and you can force that image down to a computer so you don't have to physically take a disk anywhere. That's what deployment service is all about, in a nutshell. So right now, we're going to just install ADDS. So what we would do is we click Next. It's going to give us some warnings, tell us what we need to do. After we install the Active Directory domains, we're going to then have to promote our workgroup client to a domain, which we'll do here in a few minutes. Active Directory domains and services, after you click Install, is installing those binaries for it to be functioning. Give it a minute or two because sometimes it takes a little bit. Typically, on an old, when 2008 would just first come out and you were doing this on a machine, it would take an hour just to install this and promote it to a domain controller. It's a long time. I think we're going to get this done in less than a minute. And then it'll ask us to reboot it. So we'll reboot. And then we'll promote. And then it'll ask us to reboot again. Such as Windows, right? Okay, here we go. Now we got that. Now we have to promote it. Hey, actually, once you see it right here, under the roles, once you install it, it's going to be right there. To do a feature or something to it. Now notice what happened. Remote Server Administration Tools. RSAC was installed because I installed ADDS. Now you understand what I'm saying with the features will install automatically with whatever role I'm doing. So let me click on here. Now, you're not yet running as a domain controller. Why? Because we haven't promoted it to be a domain controller. So that's what DC promo is, domain controller promote. So I'm going to click on this wonderful little thing. It's going to bring me up another wizard. You got to love the wizards with Windows. They're easy, right? Yes. Okay. Once you click into Active Directory, it'll bring up the screen like you just saw right here on the right-hand side. It'll have it in yellow. It'll say DC Promote. And you click on that. Now we'll have, I don't ever use Advanced Mode Installation because I like it to do a lot of stuff for me. I'm lazy like that. So we'll click Next. It's going to give you a spiel about, you know, Windows 2008 needs to be at least a Windows NT4 cryptography level. Okay, not a big deal. First thing it's going to ask you, are you applying this domain, this new domain controller, to an existing domain tree, or are you creating a new tree? So if you have a work environment in which you already had domain controllers, you would choose the top one. And then it will give you two things. You can create a new domain within inside that tree. So how many of y'all have heard like technet.microsoft.com or msdn.microsoft.com? Okay, that is a new domain inside of that original domain. So let me draw this up here for you real quick. We had Microsoft, right? Correct? This would be the first domain controller in this domain. Now, if I wanted to create another one, I would say existing forest and create a new domain. Then I could have TechNet, Live, MSDN, so forth, so on. Okay? And then from one of the machines in here, I could create one in here and have ex1.technet.microsoft.com. You see how you're creating a tree structure? Y'all okay with that? All right. Or in this case, we're going to create a new domain because we don't have any. So I'm just going to call it contoso.com. And it's going to get. I'm going to click next. So it's going to give it it's checking the forest to make sure there's no other forest out there named contoso.com. It's verifying my NetBIOS name that Contoso is fine, that it's not a confliction with any system that's on the network. Okay. Because there's a confliction, there's already a Contoso on the VM. It's Contoso 0.
Yeah, do that. Whoever's clicking on it.
So each one of you should get a different one, like Contoso 1, Contoso 2, so forth, so on, right? So we click next. Now it's going to ask us what level of the forest are we going to function at. Now, I'm not going to get into the nitty-gritty tech part of this, but basically all it is to what level do I want to add other domain controllers? If I still have a 2000 domain controller on my network, I have to be at a 2000 so that it can talk to my Windows 2008 server. If I put it at 2003, that 2000 can no longer talk to this box. Does that make sense? In similarity, okay, you're the new child in the family. If your older siblings only talk German and you only talk English, are you going to be able to communicate? Until you learn German. Once you learn German, then you can all communicate and you're on the same level. So basically, you want to take this to the highest level in which all your servers, the lowest level server is. So if all my servers are 2008, I'll make it a 2008. If I have one 2003, I have to knock it down to 2003. If I have one 2000, I got to put it down to 2000. Does that make sense? Everyone with me? So we're going to add ADDS. Now here's where it installs DNS by default. It's going to pop up a screen. In this case right now, I'm just going to use a static IP address. And I'll say yes. Reason being is I'm not going to give you a static address for all these systems. Okay? The NTDS, leave all these, every single time leave these alone because it makes Microsoft run a lot easier. You don't have to put a restore administrator password, but I usually do put the password that comes with the administrator account, so I don't ever have to remember it. Because once you have one password for administrator, why not keep it the same, right? So for that one box only. I'm not talking about for your entire network. Okay, then you click next. Now this is where it takes a little bit, because it's waiting for DNS to finish installing and creating that. Yes.
We got a little behind because the system shut down.
It's okay.
What name did you put your system on?
I just call it contoso.com. But it gave me a 0 after because Contoso's already out there. Y'all don't have to be doing this, but I know y'all are playing around with your 08 R2 so that you can kind of understand how things are going. That's fine. So I'm not as worried about you playing right now as I am y'all paying attention. Yes, sir.
We're still on examining
Just don't worry about it right now. Y'all can play with it during lunch or whatever. But I really want to show you some of this because we only have a little bit before the pizza gets here. And once this goes through, then we'll have our group policy, and then I can show you, go in there and I'll explain group policy to you. All right, now one thing I want to tell you about the competition. There are 15 items on the Windows 7 machine. However, for some strange reason, it's only grading 13. I don't know why. So you're going to have 13 objects you got to find for the Windows 7, and you'll have 40 objects or 39 objects to find. I put 40 on there, but you have 39 objects to find on the server. Hint, hint, hint. You'll see it, and it's going to be it'll be fun. Yes, sir.
Are we going to be doing Unix or?
We'll be starting on that next week. What I plan on doing, everybody, Today I'm talking about 2008. The same information applies to Windows 2012 server. Okay, I gave you an image so you can play with it in 2012. Now it's in a completely different graphical format. It's more of a tabular Windows 8 type system, look and feel, and it confuses a lot of network administrators. I'll tell you that now. But the functionality is identical. Okay, your manage, instead of it having the tree structure on the left, up at top it'll say manage. You click there, you can go down and do all your management from there. All right. I'll show you that right after lunch. Just bring it up, and y'all can look at it, and I'll show you. But this week each week I'm adding images to your grading. This next week I'm going to start talking about Unix systems, and we're going to be talking about Ubuntu and Fedora and CentOS. Now that my ADDS is installed, it's going to have me reboot. So I'm going to let it reboot. All right? But so the next couple of weeks, you're going to have Linux systems that we're going to be going over. Yes, sir.
Will we be using what version of Linux will we be using?
Fedora and Ubuntu and Cent.
What update of
1902. I'm sorry. Fedora 19. It's Ubuntu.
Did he say DNS?
11 or 12. I don't remember which one I put on there. Oh, I'm giving you the most up-to-date stuff because it'll still apply. You still there, Kurt?
Yeah, we're here. We're just figuring out. Did you enable the DNS server and all that stuff? Sorry.
Yes. The DNS is by default when you do Active Directory.
Okay, so where were we from this screen? Server manager.
So once you go through ADDS install, it'll automatically install DNS.
So we're doing that. Then it comes up to that.
Now, I will tell y'all,
I'm sorry.
doing these steps during the competition. It will already be set up for you.
I don't think so. I don't think so.
For Active Directory. All right?
Existing or not?
I'm pretty sure it was existing. I don't remember him putting anything new.
Maybe. Oh yeah, I think it was. He's using the MSN Microsoft.
Name the domain in the forest where you plan to install the domain control.
Okay. Anyone know why it's taking a longer time for it to boot up? Why?
Was it Contoso?
Wanted to apply all the settings.
Because you promoted it to a server, so you have a lot more settings it's got to apply. If this was a real server, you're talking about a 10-minute reboot. Seriously. Compared to a minute reboot on a single box, because you're applying all these extra services out to everybody.
No, it wasn't Chrome. It was Contoso.
Do what?
Are we gonna do grand file portion?
For Unix? Yes.
See
Now, what I'm going to do, just to give you all a heads up, your first competition is the week of October 25th, right? Of course, you know there's no class here that day. The very next 2 weeks, the 1st and the 12th, I'm going to start covering Cisco with you.
I think that's what the Contoso. Yeah.
So that you can understand the Cisco quizzes that are going to be asked of you a little bit later on. Once you get to the semifinals, you will be asked Cisco quizzes. And by the time we get to that week, I'm having college students that will be doing red hat attacks or red team attacks against you.
That face.
So while you're working on your images, yes, Johnny.
Round 2 is already next.
Oh, is it round 2 now? Okay. So round 2. So that's why I'm going to take those 2 weeks prior and prep you for it.
That's good.
Okay, I'm going to ask you specific questions. I'm going to go over it and tell you what you need to know. Now, coaches, one thing that I would recommend for these students is to get a copy of the CCNA Portable Command Guide, version 3. It's like $25 or so. You know, if they're able to get that and maybe get a couple copies so they can share it, that would be something that I would recommend. There are PDF copies available out on the internet. Don't get them because it's illegal. I'm telling you now. If you do, I don't want to know about it. I'm sure your coaches don't want to know about it. Just
Don't ask, don't tell for recording documentation.
Give everybody access to the Cisco Academy. Cisco Academy will give you access to the official Cisco curriculum.
and then there's going
It's
to,
been sent out yet, but they're saying.
and they do have a PDF guide on there for those commands, so that might save y'all a little bit. Take a look. Yeah, and what I'll do, we're going to have packet tracers in here, and I'm going to go through all of them with you and show you how to do it. Cameron can tell you how hard I am on my packet tracers, right, Cameron? Matter of fact, I got everyone's attention. If you want to know how hard I am on my students for routing, Cameron can tell you, you had 90 minutes to configure 15 servers, 12 different LANs, and it's impossible to do.
Mm-hmm.
The highest grade I've ever really given on that is a 33 for my final.
I want to take him.
And Cameron tells you, I'm not lying. I mean, there's been like five people that have made higher than a 30 on this test. But I'm going to teach you to that level. That'll be a college level. So once you get through that, you come up here, you'll ace my class because you'll have a good final and good know what you talk about. All right. Now that we're back on here, let me go. Log back in here. Okay, now I'm logging back in. Got to apply my user settings. Now notice, why does it say I've got to prepare a desktop?
Because you already reconfigured your desktop.
I've reconfigured everything. I'm no longer a workstation. I'm a server now. So the administrator has to have a server desktop profile. Okay? So what we have here, we have administrative tools. Hey, now we got some other stuff here, right, that we didn't have before. We have Active Directory, Domains and Trust, Sites and Services, all that fun stuff. Now, we didn't do any updates, did we? But let's look at these roles and these features and see how many we have now. It takes it a minute.
We probably have a lot more.
You'll have at least one. Morning. Okay, notice now we have DNS server, right? So we have a second role. I told you that was going to auto-install. And then we have group policy. They got added as a feature, right? So let's scroll back up here to the top. You'll notice now you're on the contoso.com domain. I didn't change my computer name, did I? But we have all this stuff up here. Y'all know what we're looking at, right? So now I want to explain where you're going to edit some of your computer security stuff. Instead of doing the local security policy, we're going to do what we call group policy management. Okay? This is called a Microsoft Management Console, or MMC. Underside here, we created that forest. Remember when we created the name of it? We created a new forest called Contoso. Contoso right here. Why is it Contoso, not Contoso 0? It's a little strange, isn't it? Because didn't we name it Contoso 0?
Yeah.
All right. I'm going to come down here to these group policy objects. Notice I have two different group policy objects. And to make this a little easier, ow, so that I can write on it. Wonderful. Okay, we have a default domain controller policy and a default domain policy. Anyone want to explain the difference to me? Anyone know the difference?
Won't the controller policy be the admin and the default?
No, not an admin. A default domain controller is this system itself. It applies only to domain controllers. Does it make sense? This one applies to all computers in the domain. So which one do I want to set first? And I'm going to make this easy for you. We have these two policies, right? If there's a specific thing that I want to apply only to domain controllers, I will put it only in the domain controllers. If there's stuff that I want to apply to domain controllers and all computers, I will put it just in the domain policy, because that applies to everybody. Then I can create one called default computer policy and apply that to only non-domain controller computers, where I can set backgrounds and things like that, so user profiles and whatnot. Both of these by default have the exact same structure. It just depends on what you're applying it to. Does that make sense? Think of the name of it. When you create a group policy, what are you, when you're making edited changes and everything, you're always going to deal with the default domain policy in Windows. Everyone got that? So for this example, all I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how to do this. What we're going to do is we're going to click on Edit, that default domain policy. So you'll just right-click on it, go to Edit. Then that brings up this little management console. Now there's two ways to enforce policies to a user. Okay, you can do it directly to the user, Cameron, or you can do it directly to the computer that Cameron is on. Does that make sense? So if I have a computer configuration, what am I applying those settings to? That computer. Well, in this case, it would be to every computer will have this. If I want to apply to every person that logs onto that computer, I would do it under user configuration. Does that make sense? And there are some differences. Your local security policy that you had on your Windows 7 machine is everything underneath this computer configuration. Okay? So what you're going to do, I'm going to explain these. Software installation. Is there any software specific that I want to be installed on this computer? Or on all computers? I can put it on there. All right? That's all that area does. Windows settings. You've heard of startup and shutdown scripts. Then you also have heard of log on, log off scripts, right? What's the difference? The startup shutdown applies to the computer. Log on, log off applies to the user. Does that make sense? Because as soon as that computer's turned on, it will apply printers, things of that nature to that computer. If I don't want a user, or if I want something more for that specific user, like a shared network drive, I would put that in the logon script, so that no matter where they log on, they still have access to those drives. Does that make sense? That's the difference. Security settings. This is where you're going to spend most of your time. Again, looks just like your local security policy, doesn't it? Where we have our account policies, password policy. Uh-oh, it's got some default stuff up there, doesn't it?
Yep.
Enforce password history. Why does it say 24 on here?
Because there's been 24 passwords.
No. You're setting this to say, I'm going to remember the last 24 passwords on this default domain. So what happens if my local computer said, oh, I'm only going to remember the last 5, and then I promote it, and I've had this promoted, and I've pushed out this update to everyone. How many passwords is that local computer going to memorize?
5.
Wrong. Group policy overwrites a local security policy. So if I push this out right now, any image that you had that's tied into this domain now will remember the last 24 passwords. You got that? Maximum password age. Why is it set at 42? Why not 90? 90 is for the typical user. Am I applying this to a user, or am I applying it to a computer? Well, we're still applying it to a computer, but still, you can do 90 days. That's really up to you. Minimum password age. What do they say? What should be the minimum password age? 3 to 10 days, right? Am I right? Are you sure?
I thought it was 5 days.
It's 5 days. It's within 3 to 5 or 3 to 10, right? It's 5 days. What about minimum password length? How many characters? 8. When 2008 came out, 7 was right. When 2012 came out, it's now 12. I don't think they should go much more than that. People won't be able to remember them. Password must meet complexity requirements. Remember we talked about that must be enabled, right? Store password using reverse encryption. Why would we want to enable reverse encryption? Exactly. It just removes the hash or the encryption of it. Count lockout, the thresholds. Now remember, this one and that one go hand in hand. Make sense? So what you need to do there is if you set 30 here, it'll be 30 here. What's going to be my lockout threshold? How many times are we going to allow them to get into the system? 3 to 10. Okay? Check your Cyber Patriot PowerPoints, because that's how they're going to test you off of it, all right? Kerberos policy. Why do we have Kerberos in here? Well, because we're a server. Kerberos, what does it do? It's a token that allows you access to get into credential access. Here's specific settings. They do not define this for Cyber Patriot. But I'm just telling you that's what it means. Local policies. Audit policy. What do we want to do? Anyone have an idea? If I'm looking at account logon events, do I want to log every time someone is successful?
Yes.
You want to you want to log every time someone fails. Reason being, if you see a history of someone keep repeating failing, that means someone's trying to attack your system or someone's forgot their password, one of the two. So if I see repeated, and let's say I reset my counter every 60 minutes. 60 minutes later, I got 3 more. What is it showing me? Someone's attacking me. That's why you do failures. Okay? What about account management?
You want to do both?
You want to do success. You want to know if someone changed your policies, changed your accounts. I don't care if someone failed on account management. Why? Because it didn't make my system any less secure. Does that make sense? Audit directory services. You really don't need this for 2008. You need it for NT, Win 7, Vista and XP. Audit logon events. Successes or failures. Failed logon attempts. Just like this. Between regular and accounts, okay? Object access. Do we need that? Not really. Audit policy change. What about that? Success. You want to know if someone changed your policies. Audit privilege use. You could. I usually like to do success on this and fails, so I know if an administrator made a change to my system and what they did. And if I keep seeing fails, that means someone's trying to access it, right? Audit process tracking. What do you want to do with process tracking? What does process tracking mean? You want to do success and failures for that. That will help you identify if there's a virus on your system. Because where are my processes going? Am I getting overflooded with one particular process? How many of y'all have ever gotten your system frozen up by a game? If you have this on there, it'll tell you why. Does that make sense? Y'all understand that? That's what process tracking is for. It looks for those process IDs that are in your task manager. All right? Audit system events. Do I want to do Failed system events? Yeah. So I want to know what's failing on my system. Pretty simple, right? User rights. By default, no one has any user rights because it's not defined. I mean, everyone has certain rights, but they're not defined. If I want someone specific to add a workstation to the domain, I can click on here and say these people will have access to add workstations to the domain. Make sense? All this does is this gives a specific user more rights. Or I can take away from if they had already been added on. Does that make sense? Now comes another one. Another fun area. Security options. Administrator account and guest account. Right off the top. Why are they not defined? Is that scary?
Yeah.
That means the administrator by default is enabled and the guest is disabled by default. So the guest is okay, but if it says enabled guest account, I need to make it disabled, right? I need to disable my administrator account, right? What if guest is enabled? You want to make sure it's disabled. Go down this list. What about renaming? Have you renamed the administrator account and guest account? I would highly encourage you to do so. That is something Cyber Patriot loves to check. Not only did you disable, did you rename it? Why? Because even if you disable it, I can come in with a PowerShell. Remote in is another user that has administrator rights. Re-enable it, and I've got myself a back door. Because now I know what the administrator account is.
So if it's renamed, you wouldn't know where to look for it?
Not necessarily, because I'll show you why. But it's still good to rename it. Don't name it anything CP admin or anything with admin or guest listed in there. Make it John Doe or Charlie Sheen or whatever, okay? And keep going down here. Domain, I mean, there's a lot of things on here that you need to look at. Shutdown. Remember the shutdown tracker that I was talking about? This right here. Allow system to be shut down without having to log on. Is that a security vulnerability? Yes, it is. You do not want the system to be shut down without having someone that has to log on to your domain. Because if you have it done, what's your name again, sir? Ethan's working on an assignment over here. He locks his computer to go to the bathroom. I come up here, jiggle the mouse, the screen comes up, it's locked screen. But guess what? I have a little power button on there. Click. What if he's been working for 2 years on this major project? What did I just do?
You destroyed everything, almost everything I've done.
Not everything that you hadn't saved. But if you've been working on it all day and hadn't saved it, that's why I kind of like Google Docs, because it automatically saves when you quit typing. But anyway, here are all the different types of security. So I would highly encourage you, when you're looking at any server operating system from Microsoft, go underneath the computer configuration, policies, Windows settings, and look at every single one of these and see if anything was defined. Because if it was defined and it sounds like it's not supposed to be defined, or to be opposite, enable or disable, you need to look at it, because that means they have altered it from the original image. Hint, hint, hint. Y'all write that down. You want to know what can and cannot be done. Okay? Event logs. This tells you how big of my log size am I going to allow. Am I going to allow 100 megabits or 10 megabits? Kilobits, bits. Okay? Retain security log for how long? What's a good length of time for security log? Let's say we are in the medical field. How long should we maintain our security log? No, how many years? 7. By HIPAA, you're required to keep all medical records and any medical system data for 7 years. So I can go back for 7 years and see anyone that's got on my application, security, or system. Now, if you're in the medical field, yes, you want to take a log for everyone that successfully logged onto your system, so that you can see who's altered stuff, right? But these are the areas in which you really need to look at Restricted groups. You can restrict groups. You can do system services. Like y'all seen. Let's see, where is it? Most of all the ones that you need to stop are down here. Plug and play needs to be stopped. All these remote access and RPCs need to be stopped. Remote registry needs to be stopped. SSDP discovery, plug and play. All those need to be stopped. Why? Because that allows people from the remote systems to get into your system. Okay? This is an area which you're going to want to do to go and change things. Now, let's say, now that you know where everything's at, one easy way to do this, let me come back over here, is if you come over here to administrative tools, you have the administrative templates. You can come over here to all settings. So if there's a specific one of these that are configured, you want to check that, research it, and see what needed to be on or off. Does that make sense? So I encourage you, when you're going through this, go through each one of these step by step and say, okay, force select the system UI language to overwrite the user UI language. Go out to TechNet or MSDN. Should this be enabled or disabled? If it shows enabled and it should be disabled, what do you need to do? Disable it, right? That's how you're going to beat Cyber Patriot. Does that make sense? Y'all want to win, right? Y'all want that free trip to Washington, D.C.? How many of y'all know about that? If you make it to the national round, the Air Force Association pays for you to go up to Washington, D.C. to compete. All expenses paid. That means they'll fly you out from Will Rogers and send you up there, or fly you out from Denver, Kurt, any of your team. If you want to win, that's how winning teams do it. They look and say, okay, maximum this. And then as you get closer to the national round, people are going to be coming in and changing things behind you. Okay? So I'm telling you that now. So what you're going to do is you're going to need to go back and start looking at these. Make sure that all the settings, write down what your setting is supposed to be. Does that make sense? Write it down. Make sure you got it going in and doing it for each one of these systems. And then if you have one expert, because you can have up to 5 people participate, it'd be 7. You have your Cisco image and then 5 other images probably. So 1 person per each image, and all they do is keep going back and making sure all these configurations are the way they should be, right? So if you want to do research and know how to do it, create you a website with all these and say what the configuration should be. Do your research on your own. Then you can. All you have to do is just click. Okay, 5. That's fine. That's fine. That's fine. Keep going through it while you're going through your hours. Because I guarantee you, when red teams come in here and attack, you're going to chase something, you're going to overlook it, and then you lose points. They may turn on the roller services that you're not aware of. Okay? Go through each one of these and do that. That's what's going to help you become better. And you'll understand Windows like you wouldn't believe. Preferences. This is always someone's favorite area. Windows settings. I can change my registry, network shares, all that stuff from right here. I can go down to control panel settings, and I can change all these stuff. Is there any questions on this? On that part for the group policy? Once you've made your changes to group policy, y'all know where the run command is, right? You have your start key, run, and in run, you're going to type this, GP update /force. Once you get all your settings done, you will need to know this today, because once you get those settings, if you've put them in the GPO but you haven't applied it, guess what? You're not going to get credit for it. Any questions on that? Now, on a server, since we've promoted, we have a different area for the users and groups. Remember, I was talking about Active Directory users and computers. Yes, sir.
Script legal.
If they write them themselves. In other words, if they go and they write their own script to do an ADMX,
If they write all of their notes into the website and write a script to go in.
and they put it, all they got to do is put that script as an executable, download it, they can click it, it'll apply that ADMX to it, run GP update, and you can just continually run it, and I guarantee you no one's going to be able to do anything, because when you go into nationals, you cannot carry a single piece of paper with you. Everything has to be from a public resource. So you create a public website that you have access to, go buy you a domain name for $1.99 for the first year, or go to GeoCities or whatever, isn't that still a thing?
I hope not.
Or go create you a website somewhere, Zanga or whatever, I don't care what it is. Put this information out there, because that way it's publicly available to everybody. Download your script that you've created for your ADMX, and they're out there. If you really want to, go to DISA's website, disa.mil, or disa.gov. Well, I think it's iase.disa.gov. And what it does is it will tell you how to secure a system. They have those ADX files out there. You can apply those XML ADMX configurations through a script. Voila! That'll tighten your system down. Yes?
Are we able to pull scripts off of public domains if we didn't write them?
It doesn't matter. The only ones that cannot write it are your coaches and myself. We can't do it for you. You can go get anything that's publicly available. If someone else had written the script and you see it and you want to snatch it, go right ahead. But it can't. It has to be that y'all wrote it, or it was publicly available that none of us wrote for you. Yes.
What's the address for that website?
IASE. Let me bring it up for you. I'll bring it up on another screen here in just a minute. It's iase.disa.gov or .mil.
DISA.
DISA. So, okay. Let's get through this real quick, and then so I can shut this down, and then I will show you all where that site is, and then we'll break for lunch. Okay? Sound like a plan? So if I have your attention for maybe 10 more minutes. I know y'all really want to get out of here and stand up and walk around, because I know I'm monotone today and I'm boring you to death, right? Okay, Contoso.com. You have users. Notice what's wrong with that picture? It's enabled. You know how you know? You see this little down arrow right there on the bottom left of that image? This means it's a down arrow means it's disabled. If there's not there, it's an enabled account. So my guess is disabled, my administrator is enabled. So is that a violation? Yes. Y'all saw where I went to get this, right? Start, administrative tools, Active Directory users and computers. That's simple. Any questions? Any questions on this? Going once. Going twice. Yes, sir.
Why does that have to be disabled?
A administrator name called administrator is by default. And if I know the user account, doing a brute force attack is a heck of a lot easier. That's why they tell you to rename the account, so that you don't know that. You have to guess that administrator account and then brute force it. Everyone okay with it? Yes, sir.
We did everything the same. It didn't show Contoso anywhere. It just shows saved qualities.
Did you do your promote? I don't know if you promoted or not. We'll talk about it a little bit later on. Okay. Is there any questions? All right. So I'm just gonna shut this down for now. All right. From DISA. This is Defense Information Systems Agency. It's the Information Assurance Support Environment. Okay. Over here, are a lot of different ways that you can find things, technical guides on how to secure things. Anywhere where it says PKI, you don't have access to. If it doesn't, like let's see here, STIGs. This tells you here's a STIG for Apple iOS 8 already. Tells you how to secure Apple iOS 8. How handy is this site? Now seriously, if you want to know how to secure something, go to DISA. Okay? They keep up with all the CVEs and everything. Now, there's where is it? Tools. Cybersecurity tools. Here's some different tools. Publicly available. Hint, hint, hint. Okay? But if you go back here to the STIG's home, you come over here to STIG tools. Okay? You can download the STIG tool, and it'll help you read the STIGs. What a STIG is a security technical implementation guide. It tells you how each different item is supposed to be secured. Each one of those things that I was showing you that you need to go through, this will tell you what needs to be set. Okay? There's a place on here, and I can't show it to you because that would be cheating. But I would peruse this site very carefully because the ADMX things are out there. And you can just apply a couple little small things, and your SVEGRL .dll might come in handy. Hint, hint, hint. So knowing that, going to search for it on Google will tell you how to, you run it, you remove it from your System32 file, you put this one in its place, and it'll tell you what you need to enable, disable, and whatnot. It'll tell you the difference between how to secure, what's secured and what's not. Go down and set those changes to it to where you're 100% DISA compliant, and that means you can't do anything on your system, and that will be really secure. Hint, hint, hint. Is there any questions? Yes, sir. Do what? Go back and listen to my video. Is there any questions? All righty. Well, that's it for the lecture for this morning. And then what we'll do is we'll break, and the pizza should be here momentarily. And then, now, one thing I want to tell you, everybody, the Air Force Association bought you one drink. And Cameron will be back there. Cameron, raise your hand. Okay. You tell him which drink you want, he'll give it to you. You only get one. If you want anything else after that, you have to go to the bidding machine. So at least they're buying you at least one drink this round, right? For this year, last year they had to pay for it, or you had to pay for it. So got them to get that along with the pizzas. Is there any questions on that? Kurt, y'all okay?
Yeah, we're okay. We just had a little bit of problems promoting the server, but I think we're getting there. So.
Alrighty. Well, I'm gonna hang up the call, and then y'all can go ahead and start your image if you want.
Okie doke. Thank you.
Alrighty. Y'all have a good one.
Yeah, you too.
All right.